Hey guys, George Booker here with Bukurs Glass, and in today's video we're going to be making a dry hammer pipe. I'm really excited to bring this one to you guys. Had a lot of fun making this. This is going to be the exact one that's going to be in the video. I'll show you how it looks at the end of the video behind a black background. The colors are absolutely phenomenal. I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. Very excited and really stoked to get this one out to you guys. The tools that we're going to need in this video are going to be a reamer, a bowl push. This is a 5/8. I like to use a bigger bowl push for some of my bigger pieces like hammer pipes, bubblers, etc. I use this graphite rod to open up my blanks so I can put my inside out work. A paddle, tweezers, tungsten pick to make that perfect bowl hole, and some grabbers. Now I also use this reamer. Really helps open up my joints. I like to flare my joints so when I'm connecting two pieces of glass together, they have a nice spot to connect to, and I can really work that glass in so it's not too crunched up together. I'll explain it in the video. But yeah, guys, let's get to it. Really excited for you guys to check this one out. Let me know what you think. If you like the video and you find it helpful in any way, please like, subscribe, and go ahead and check me out on Insta at Bukurs_glass. Yeah, thanks guys. Alrighty. As you can see, guys, I'm starting out with an already made pre-made blank, and it is gold and silver fumed. If you guys want to know how to do this, go check out my video on how to make a gold and silver inside out fumed pipe. It's going to show you the steps that I take to get to this point. Now I'm just punting up here, making sure that I'm on axis. This is going to be the handle to my hammer pipe. Now when I go in on this handle, I'm going to make sure that I have a nice bushy flame. I really want to try to stretch out the glass as much as I can in terms of material. I really want to use as much of it as I can while still keeping a nice thick consistency. I guess what I'm searching for here is proportion. I want a good proportionate handle to my hammer. And so I go in and I hit right in the center there. And I really let that heat soak in. It's very important that I let that glass really condense down on itself. When I condense the glass like this, my inside out work really wants to implode, and it creates a really cool effect. As you can see here, I'm kind of letting gravity make that taper, as well as the heat that I just applied to that center. Puffing slightly, depending on how thick or thin I want my walls. And it's really important that I let the piece cool down at this point. I got the shape that I want. And I want it to cool down because I'm going to come in and I'm going to try to push a couple Marias here. I'm going to get a nice needle flame. I'm going to push one down by the mouthpiece here. I really let a band of heat start to form before I start pushing. As you can see, I start to go in for a nice push while still rotating evenly. And just like that, We have a nice Maria. Now, a lot of times I'll go in on the other side of the Maria, like you're seeing here, and I'll do a little bit of condensing of the glass, and it really helps exaggerate that Maria. I make sure not to overdo it. It really doesn't take a lot, but it just really helps that Maria be pronounced. Now I'm going to go in on the other side and push another Maria. Being mindful of the size of my other Maria, I try to make sure that they're relatively close in size. Doesn't have to be an exact science, but aesthetically it just looks better. Same thing, I'm heating up a band here. And then I start to push. Pushing together while rotating. And it gives us a nice Maria. Now I do the same thing as I did on my other Maria. I go on the other side and help condense that glass down to really help exaggerate that Maria that I just created. And now I just flashed my punty. It's supposed to be a cold seal. And a lot of times I'll get ahead of myself a little bit. And when I connect my blank to my punty, sometimes my blank is still a little too hot. But a lot of times when you have a cold seal, if you flash it with the flame like that, and then you break it off, it usually tends to come off relatively easily. Now at this point, I'm soaking in a lot of the heat here towards the end of my handle. I really want to create a certain shape, and that's what I'm going for here. You know, what's different from me, and I noticed a lot of other guys, I really tend to use gravity to get my shapings. A lot of guys will use their Marver, but to each their own. You know, there's a lot of ways to do these things, guys. A lot of ways. I tend to go more of the gravity route. I mean, it really almost looks like I'm creating a pipe here. I mean, essentially just like a regular spoon. And that's what's so cool about pipe making, is that it really does lay down a really cool foundation for you to kind of just start from and flourish from, really. A lot of the things you do in pipe making when it comes to condensing the glass down, stretching it out, pushing Marias, is all stuff that's really going to come in handy when you start moving to these more intricate pieces, you know, such as hammers or bubblers or Sherlocks even, you know. A lot of times even making rigs, having even wall thickness, stuff like that all comes into play when making a simple pipe. Now, what I'm doing here is I'm condensing the glass back closer to that Maria. I have a certain shape in my mind that I'm really trying to shoot for. And so in order to do that, I have to condense this glass back as close to that Maria as I can. It's really funny, when I was making this, I I was talking to my girlfriend. She's the one who's filming, and in my head, you know, or I was telling her, you know, it's just like making a pipe essentially. It literally is just like making a pipe. Every point that I've made up to this, right here, every step I've done up to this is literally making a pipe, and it's the coolest thing because only a few extra steps and it turns into a really beautiful handle for a hammer. So here I start to puff out. I go back into the flame, condense down. And I got my glass close to the Maria like I was looking to do. And now I'm going for my shaping. So I'm going to heat and really let that dip down. And just like that, you know, we're manipulating glass. It's super, super cool, guys. It's really fun too. So I'm getting that nice oblong shape that I'm looking for. Now, keep in mind here, I'm actually going to go ahead and pop a hole here. That's what I'm looking to do. And while I'm doing that, I'm trying to keep my consistency of my glass relatively even here. Because ultimately, this is going to be the part that connects to my hammer can. Making sure everything's nice and even. Trying to sustain a nice even heat base throughout that glass. Now here's where I come in, and I'm going to go ahead and start to want to pop this hole. I'm really allowing some glass to build up right here, because this is where I'm going to start to pick. Really, really important in glass. This is something that was super confusing to me in the very beginning. It's all about having control with what you're heating. You can see here perfectly in the video, the part that is hottest is that part that I just plunged my punty into. And I make sure that that's the part that remains the hottest. I'm not trying to get new glass to keep falling into that area. I'm just trying to get that part hot enough to thin and then to pop, just like so. Now I come in with my reamer. I make sure I flare it open. After I get a nice flare, I go in with my other reamer. Really dial it in. Now I let that sit in the kiln, and now I'm going to go over and start working on my hammer can. The reason I let that sit in the kiln was because I'm going to actually blow tube up to that side that I just opened and start working on that mouthpiece. And that mouthpiece was just really cold, so I'm going to get it back up to temperature. So I go in on my pre-made blank here that I've decided is going to be my can. And I really just soak in the heat, keeping in mind the shape that I want. You know, I'm going for a hammer, so I want something that's going to be very hammer-like. So I'm going to heat up that end, let it stretch out a tad, and you'll see a lot. If you watch my handle, you can see that it's pointed up, and I'm really going for length. You know, I want this thing to stretch out nice and well because I want my hammer to be very exaggerated. I want a really nice long hammer head. Like I said, a lot of my manipulating with glass is mainly through gravity. You know, there is a point in here where I roll my piece on the marver, but mainly just to keep a nice consistent wall consistency throughout. You know, sometimes that's needed when working with bigger pieces like a big can. But it's totally doable with gravity and essentially your breath. That's what's the coolest part about glass is, seriously, there are so many ways to do things, guys. There really, really is. I'm just taking my time, condensing it out, puffing it out. And right here, I'm heating up the end now because I want the end not to be crazy thick. Because at this point, you know, this is going to be where my piece is going to sit, essentially. This is going to be the bottom of my hammer. Scratch that. Sorry, this is actually going to be the top of my hammer, I believe. Either way, I don't want either end of this can to be super thick. The point being is because if, say for instance, if I go to push a bowl hole, I don't want it to be crazy thick. The same goes for if I go to flatten this piece and have the bottom of my hammer, I don't want that to be crazy thick either. It's going to thicken up quite a bit when I go to heat and reshape. So it's good that I start out with not a thin piece of glass, but a relatively thick, but not overly thick piece of glass. So as you could see, I opened up that end there, and I'm going to attach a blow tube up to it. I made sure to put my earplug at the end of my blow tube, and I'm blow hosed up to the other end of this piece, and I'm going to connect these two pieces of glass. So I get both pieces very, very hot, molten. I push, I pull, and I puff. Ever so slightly. And the glass becomes one. It's super, super cool. Now I'm going to go in on that other end, detach that punty, or that blow hose there. And my memory card actually died, but all that happened was I took that part off, that blow tube, and I just flipped it around. And now I'm heating up that other side. And I'm going to get this side nice and hot. And essentially do the same thing that I did to the other side that I'm now blow hosed up to. Really just working in that glass, manipulating it, move in my desired position. And a lot of heat goes into this. I noticed a lot of guys first starting out with pipes and stuff like that, they're afraid to really let the piece get hot. But you know, that's fairly common. It's something that I suffered with in the very beginning. I remember thinking that I needed a new torch and, you know, a whole bunch of things, right? What is that saying? You know, they say the bad carpenter blames their tools. I was that bad carpenter, I guess. But over time, you know, things started heating up more, and a lot of that is because I would keep my piece in the flame more instead of taking it out and puffing and looking at it. You know, I really let that heat soak in. You know, the more that you allow it to stay out of the flame, you know, the more time it's going to take to get to the heat that you want. The more time you keep it in the flame, the hotter it's going to get, the faster it's going to get to the temperature you want it to be at. As you can see there, I rolled it on the Marver a tad bit because I'm really looking for a consistent, even wall throughout this whole can. It's a relatively long piece of glass that I'm going for. And I really want a straight line. You know, I don't want any weird bulges or bumps along this can. So just like before, I'm heating up that end now, and I don't want a huge glob of glass there. I want it to be nice and even, nice and thick, but not too thick. Because this part is going to be the bottom of my hammer. Yeah, if you guys have made it this far, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and go check me out on Instagram at Bukurs_glass. Really taking my time on this. I want to make sure that everything is just perfect. So I threw that into the kiln. And now I'm working on a blow tube. I'm going to blow tube up to that handle that we were just working on. And I'm making this blow tube close to the size of that handle opening as I possibly can. I want things to go seamless. Alrighty, so I make sure that both pieces of glass get nice and hot. As you can see, I start heating up the thicker piece of glass first, because it takes a little longer to get to that molten state opposed to the thinner piece of glass. Now I'm going to join the two together. I'm going to pull and puff, and the two become one. Now, keep in mind, I'm pulling out at the same time as this cools down, really making sure I'm on axis. It's very, very important that I stay on axis, because this next step that I'm going to do is going to be essentially making a bubble, because I really want that mouthpiece to have a nice bubble shape. So now I'm going on my mouthpiece end here, and I'm going to detach this handle here. And I have probably the most fun doing this part here. I don't know what it is, but shaping a cool handle for a piece is something I really like, whether it's a hammer, bubbler, Sherlock. Seeing it come together is so exciting to me. You can see I'm using gravity to really let that glass fall back on itself to create that squat shape that I'm looking for my bubble. And bringing it out of the flame, giving it a few seconds, and then puffing. I want that glass to reach the same heat base because it can be a little even or uneven coming straight out of the flame. So I take it out, I rotate it, give it a second, and then I start to puff. As you can see, it's becoming more of a bubble here. Taking my time in the process, this is something that I want to be a really beautiful, exquisite piece. I'm not looking to, pump these out at a crazy speed, because this is something that I really want people to look at and admire. And so it's very important that I take my time and I really try to pay attention to the details. You can see they're a beautiful shape. I am very happy with that shape. I go in, I heat it up a little more, adding some thickness. And now I'm going to go ahead and pop the hole to the mouthpiece. Letting everything cool down a tad bit so I can really focus on the spot that I'm trying to create a hole at without distorting that bubble that I just created. So heating it and just popping a hole, coming in with my reamer. So right here, you can see I'm going for a cold seal. And I've done this on rigs and stuff like that, and sometimes it can be a pain in the butt. It's scary, man. Like if you make one little bump, that whole piece could fall off. So what a cold seal is essentially I get one piece of the glass really molten hot and I stick it to the other piece of the glass that is not molten hot. It creates a seal that's relatively fragile, but it will hold. Now, as you can see here, I really start to pull on the piece and it snaps. Now, that's when I decide, you know what, screw it. I'm just going to make a hot seal. I don't want to mess around with a cold seal, have something bump and it break. It's a very important part of the piece. That's essentially what my whole piece is going to be standing on, is that handle. So I decided to go in for a hot seal. Get both pieces molten, push together, pull, and puff. making sure everything stays on axis. Very, very important. And now I'm going to go ahead and take off the other side of my handle there, because now we're going to go ahead and attach up to the can that we just made after a few more steps. Now I'm just kind of showing you guys the colors that we're getting here. Pretty outstanding. As you can see, the glass is all nice and even. So I take my can out of the kiln and I go ahead and I pick a spot that I want to connect my handle up to. It's very important to me, at least, because there's a plethora of colors in there, and what side do I want to be the back side of the hammer? What side do I want to be essentially obstructed from this connection that's going to be happening? And so that's very important. So now I go in and I get a nice heat base there, and I puff. As you can see there, my glass starts to thin out, and I pop. Now I go in with my reamer and I start to ream this hole open. It's very important that I go in the way that I do. As you can see, I really make those edges stick out. Just like that. It's very important that my two pieces I'm connecting have a really easy time connecting to each other. The more that you work on this step, the more that you make essentially your seal, the more that you set up your seal, the easier it's going to be, the less work you have to do when melting in your seal. And that's really what I'm doing here. I'm making sure I'm reaming it to the nice consistent size that I want it to be. Remember, the more that I work on this, the easier it's going to be when I heat my piece together. So if I get this the same size as my handle, it's going to go together very smoothly. Going up, making sure that seal's nice and flush. Trying to prevent any holes from happening. Sometimes when you connect two pieces of glass, when they're too uneven, you can get some holes. And that's what I'm trying to prevent right there. So this is a really important part too. When doing a seal, I'd say shoot almost 90% of the time. I want to say 99, but I'm sure there's some guys who would disagree with that. When doing a seal, you're going to want to bridge up. It just gives you a lot of freedom to really get that glass hot without having to worry about it drooping or getting uneven. So what I'm doing here is I am essentially adding a place where I can bridge up to really easily. A post, if you will. And so I want to make sure that this is a hot seal. I recommend not putting these on as cold seals. When glass has acute angles and it's not fully melted in, it's prone to cracking. And the last thing you want is for your bridge to crack while you have a molten, seal. It's really not good. Trust me, I've had that happen plenty of times. I've learned this the hard way. Make sure that these are nice and molten. I use my Elmarver to really get the angles that I want. Those beautiful colors on that can. Yeah, don't mess around with that. Make sure everything is nice and put together there. You want a hot seal for sure. Now I'm going to take my handle and I'm going to create a hole. I'm going to do my best to match it with the size of the hole on my can that I just created. Really, really digging the shape that I have here. And you guys can do this. I mean, you can manipulate it in so many. I mean, there's so many ways, but it's really cool when you realize that, you know, to make the mouthpiece the way you want it. I mean, shoot, all you got to do is flip it around. Essentially, is you know, add a blow tube up to your other side and really start working on that mouthpiece. For some reason, that was something that I didn't really grasp in the very, very beginning. It was such a mystery to me, I guess. It was really, really mysterious, and I didn't know how guys were doing it. You know, I almost thought that they were pushing like a Maria and working it somehow to be like that. But no, it was kind of like an aha moment when I figured this one out. So now I'm trying to make sure my glass doesn't get too thick here. I want the two pieces of glass that I'm connecting to be as close to even as possible. And so I got it to where I wanted it, and now I'm going to add my bridge point onto my handle. Kind of like a post, as some would say. So you're going to add your post here, and like I said, make sure it's a hot seal. Very important. I'm going to go ahead and go on my Elmarver and melt that in. Now, once I do that, I let each piece sit in the kiln for about 15 minutes. And it's time to do my connection. Keeping in mind where I put my posts is how I'm going to connect my two pieces together. Getting both pieces nice and molten. I'm going to push, puff, and pull. Now, when I went to puff, nothing was happening. I could tell that there was a leak somewhere, right? Because I have an earplug in my handle side, and I have my blow hose on the other side. So I knew that there's something was up. There was a hole somewhere. But I'm thinking, you know, okay, screw it. Only a matter of time before this glass gets super unhappy and starts to crack. So I need to bridge up quick before I really assess the damage. So I go in, I make sure my bridge is hot seal. Very important. Make sure that bridge gets nice and sealed in there. Of course, you want to do it in a timely manner. That glass that you just put together is not happy. It wants to crack. It really does. So now I go in and I start to heat that seal with my hand torch. Now, before I do that, actually, I'm going to take off my handle here so I have some more free range of motion. Yeah, in my head the whole time here, I'm freaking out. I'm freaking out because I'm like, oh man, I need to hurry up. You can't move too fast with glass. I mean, you're working with some pretty hot material, so you want to be safe.
There we go. So I'm putting my blow hose up to that side. Now I'm going in my hand torch. Hoping I don't hear the dreadful tink. And no, we're okay. So I can see the issue. There is a hole there. What I decide to do is actually work the easier parts in first and then come back to that hole. And so I work those easier parts in. I come back to that hole with a 3mm rod. And I just give it a nice little swipe. Little surgery there. And I start to heat that in. Now I sped this part up. Guys, I spend a lot of time on my seals. I got this thing bridged up. Nothing's gonna happen. Now I'm gonna really work this seal in. I want it to be as happy as possible. I want these two pieces of glass to become one. And that is my goal here. So I come in with my hand torch and I really kind of do it in sections. You know, I pick one section, I'll do it in another, and it's about 4 sections. I heat, puff, heat, and puff. And then when I feel like I got it really good with my hand torch, I'll go in with my center flame on my bigger torch and really heat that glass and make sure that it's as happy as can be. But I can't stress enough, I love the hand torch. The hand torch is probably one of my most useful tools. If I must say, it's super helpful. I definitely recommend getting one. So I got it to where I liked it there, and I come in and I really make sure that the seal is happy with my center flame. And keep in mind, guys, there's a little bit of editing here. I really spent a lot of time on this. I made sure that this piece was nice and happy before I went and stuck it in the kiln. So I stuck it in the kiln, I took my bridge point off, and now I'm going ahead and I am pretty much going to form the bottom of my hammer. Let me get it nice and hot. Moving, trying to stay on axis as much as possible. Not letting that glass droop too much. It's important that I flip it upside down like that and I give it a puff. For me personally, that's what really has allowed me to not get too crazy with it. If I notice it starts flipping to one side, I can always bring it back like that, give it some puffs. And so right here, I got it to where I wanted. I'm going to push and kind of pull towards me. It's going to create a nice, cool little shape that I like on my hammers. It almost gives you that back side of your hammer effect. You know, this part that you use to take nails out of wood. I think it's pretty cool. Now, what's cool about this method is a lot of times when I've made bubblers in the past, it always comes down to I would do the bowl piece first. And so I would have the downstem in there. And when I would do this part, it was always kind of hit and miss. I would measure it and everything, but it was always hit and miss on whether or not I was going to tack the bottom of that can. In this way, if you push your can first, you get the bottom going first, it really gives you a chance to, I guess I would say a better chance at not tacking your downstem for your bubbler. Now this is just a dry piece though. So I go in after all that. I did let it sit in the kiln for a little bit here. Don't be fooled by the magic of editing, but I go ahead and I decide to rip off this part where I was bridged up to. Using my handy dandy tweezers there. And now I'm going to go in and really try to make this part even. Now, it's really intimidating. A lot of guys will push their bowl first. I took a lot of advice from the Torch Talk videos and Mike Mason on how he recommends doing seals before you do your bowl push and everything like that. It just allows you to really work with that glass and puff it out without having to, I guess, really puff too hard. A lot of times when there's a hole there and you're trying to puff, you don't have a lot of control, or as much control as you should, or as much control as, I mean, I personally would even want. So I want as much control as possible. And so right here, I am doing my best to keep this glass happy and on axis. I don't want it to droop to one side. So what I do here is I really start to heat it up. I make sure to switch hands. You could really see the cool shape that I got going there on that hammer. Really digging it. Really making sure that glass gets nice and even. Keep in mind, I am puffing, guys. You can see in the background there, I hold it just like that, give it a nice puff to make sure it rounds out and the glass evens out. I move a lot, and I got to give props to my girlfriend. She tries to keep up with me. It's hard. So I go ahead and pop my bowl hole, keeping it in center as much as possible. And now I'm going to go in and pretty much do the same thing, but with a hole there. Now this glass is going to want to close up on you. You just got to be mindful and give it some puffs to keep it from closing. So I got it to a consistency that I'd like. I go ahead and I go for a bowl push, and man, the deep bowl. I was super happy with how this bowl turned out. It's gonna make for a really nice party bowl. I still have the piece, the making of this video. So if anybody's interested in it, hit me up. I would love to sell it. So I go in, you know, when you manipulate glass like that, guys, you create a lot of stress. So I'm going in and I'm making sure I get rid of all that stress that I just created. And some of you might ask, you know, your bowl hole closing with all that heat, and it is a little bit, but I make sure that it doesn't close all the way, or get too close to closing. Now I don't puff in at this point when I'm working out those stress lines. I really rely on my tungsten pick to make sure that that hole is the right size that I want. Get this glass hot enough, it'll pierce right through that glass. Now I'm going in, cleaning up any extra stress that I could have just caused from that tungsten pick. And just like that, we have a nice bowl. And now I'm going to go in and start to work on the carb. Now keep in mind, guys, my flame size here. I really want to heat up a decent amount of glass here. While I was heating up that decent amount of glass, I was heating up my tungsten pick as well, because I just took that piece out of the kiln after I had done my bowl. And then, as you can see there, I stuck that tungsten pick into that hole to plug it up, and then I popped the glass that I had just been heating. It's important that you do that step because you don't want to put a cold tungsten pick on your hot glass. You know, your glass will want to crack. You want to try to heat up and keep those two temperatures, the tungsten pick and the glass, as close to even as possible. So I got my carb done. Now I'm going to go ahead and add some attachments that I made. Now these will be available in another video. I'll show you guys how I do my attachments, or at least how I make them. So with this, I'm making sure that the attachment's molten while the hammer can is really nice and hot. You don't want to get it too hot to where it's distorting the shape, but you want it to be nice and hot so when you apply the two, they will want to connect as evenly as possible. You know, the glass wants to become one when both pieces are hot. So now I go in and I start working that attachment in with my torch, my hand torch. I let that sit in the kiln after I get that done for about 10 to 15 minutes, and I add my other attachment. Now at this point, it's always nerve-wracking for me. Attachments are relatively easy, but I always get nervous because I've made a hammer. You know, as you can see here, the piece is essentially done. All I got to do is the mouthpiece. And the last thing I want to do is mess it up adding some attachments. So it gets a little nerve-wracking. Trying to keep this even straight down the center of that handle as possible. Have a nice gold seal on my marble there. And I just bang it on my V-marver and voila. Now I go in and I really work in that glass that I just, you know, connected. I'm trying to make those two pieces one. So my attachment and my handle there. And that actually came out really nice. I made sure everything looked nice and even and proportionate. And then I throw that in the kiln for another 10 to 15 minutes, and now it's time for me to do my mouthpiece. So I take my grabbers, I make sure that they're just as hot as my hammer head here. Last thing you want to do is crack your piece with some cold claw grabbers. I try to make sure everything is on axis with those claw grabbers as possible. And I go in on my mouthpiece, making sure I have the right flame to do so. I'm going to take off my handle, and this part is so nerve-wracking to me, guys. I mean, we're there. We are in the fourth quarter, so I'm going to decide to do... I'm going to try to pick the hole out, essentially, is what I'm doing here. And I mess up a little bit. My punty breaks off on me, so I try to tweeze it out, but the glass cooled faster than I expected. I am panicking. But I keep my composure, and I go in and I just swipe that glass off. And I go in and I try to do the same thing again. Being mindful of where I'm applying my heat, thinning out that glass. And boom, we got a hole. But unfortunately, that hole is a tad too big. I was not happy with the hole size, so I wanted to do something about it. So me here, as you can see, I'm using gravity to try to let that glass thicken up and close up that hole. And I'm starting to get worried at this point because my claw grabbers are cooling down and my glass is cooling down. And the last thing I want it to happen is that piece to crack. And it's not closing down as fast as I would like. So I decide that I'm gonna assist it a little bit. I heat it up and it's just like I'm closing up a blank. I take this punty and I just swipe the hole, not closed, but I just swipe it down to the size that I want it. And this actually worked out beautifully. The hole came out super, super perfect and very, very nice. As you can see. There it is. And that's my piece, guys. And this is how it turned out. Let me know what you guys think. I really, really hope you found the video helpful. Like, subscribe if you did. And please don't forget to go ahead and check me out on Instagram at Bukurs_glass. I couldn't be more happier with how this piece turned out. The colors are absolutely gorgeous. Really, really pretty. I am obsessed with this hammer. Like I said, guys, if you want to buy this piece, hit me up. Hit me up in the comments. Hit me up on Facebook or Instagram. Don't be shy. You know, even if you have any questions or anything, just hit me up, guys. Got a little kickstand action here. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you watching the video. Y'all take it easy.